Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for showing up. We took last month off from this because we were teaching, and a few of you who were in that training are here, and we're so happy that you actually would come back after spending a whole month with us.
You might be recuperating.
So thank you. And Richard and I started doing these talks in March of 2020. And we started doing them right around, because of the pandemic, trying to just connect. We were all the way over in Thailand, kind of stranded on an island, which was a nice place to be at the time. And yet, the feeling of really needing and wanting to connect was very palpable at that beginning phase in the pandemic. And I'm sure all of you remember, it's one of those times in history. For me, like when President Kennedy was shot, I was just a kid, but I remember the day and hearing about it and what was going on and all of that. And that's in these sort of important times in history, that's what happens, is you really remember vividly. It's almost like you have a snapshot sort of burned into your system.
Into your fascia. Yeah, your sanskars.
Yeah. And so we, like everyone else at that point, thought, oh, this will be this thing we do for a couple of weeks or 6 weeks. And
2
certainly,
months maximum.
Yeah, certainly by the summer, so, but it has been just an amazing experience to be able to connect to people all over the world through this medium. And so we're very, very happy to have continued to do this. But we were sort of drawn to do it because there was a calamity. There was a sort of event that was happening that seemed like it was, making the world a very, very different and frightening place. And as we look at what has transpired since then, with the changes that have happened with, coincidentally, the George Floyd event that then worldwide opened up discussion about sort of the way we are as humans able to objectify others and be brutal. And then in the midst of this as well, some of the difficulties with the environment have come to light. And we were talking earlier today just about in this week alone, this 1 week right here, right from last Wednesday,
yeah.
There have been calamity after calamity. The natural disaster of the flood in Pakistan, where as of yesterday or so, maybe even this morning, there have been at least 1,300 people who have died, and more are showing up every day. I read earlier this morning that in one of the southern parts of Pakistan, there is something like 500 or 550 people who have died. Of those, almost half of them are children. And so it's just this huge calamity with flood. Meanwhile, fires.
Yeah, California.
Yeah.
Europe, particularly Southern Europe, is getting creamed.
Flooding in even in the United States at the moment. And there was flooding in Europe this summer. So it's, we're in this bizarre time in history. And when we think about it, and I, having been a person who's done yoga for a long time, and I I kind of go into things and look at the map later. Like I'll go to a city and explore the city and learn my way around and all of that. And then on my way out on the plane or waiting for the plane, I open the map and look at it. And that's kind of the way I've been dealing with the world in the last period of time, is this enormous amount of upheaval is surrounding all of us. And then now it's time for me finally to begin looking at a map a little more closely. And as a yoga practitioner, I remember early on, some calamity happening and someone saying to me, oh, it's the Kali Yuga. And so I kind of knew what that meant. But when events like this happen, as yoga people, often what we hear is, oh, well, this is the Kali Yuga. And then as if that's enough to say about it. But we thought it might be interesting to kind of look at what are the yugas? What do they mean? How have they come into being? And then how do they relate to today's events?
Yeah, so the yugas, to my understanding, which is I'm just beginning, these are periods of time and that have been mapped out and then remapped. There's very little mention of them in the early Rig Veda, but then by the later Rig Veda and then the books that came around 800 before the Common Era, just when the earliest Upanishads of the Brahmanas, this was where it was becoming just part of ordinary talk that the whole universe would go in these big cycles where you would have good times, which would be called the Kritya or the Satya Yuga. And that's when everybody loved everybody and the weather was good. And, they didn't even need different society function. And you can almost imagine that. And then the Treta Yuga, which Treta is based on the word three. And this is when society started to break down a little bit. And so people had to start, talking and studying in order to figure out things. And then the Dwapara Yuga, which is the two. And this is, just almost like the Bronze Age. And so people are then starting to, migrate and interact in different ways. But then the Kali Yuga is the one that everyone is always excited because, in a sense, it's always here, and the others are just almost in our imagination. But Kal just means time or a moment, and it's referring in some of the old stories to the rolling of the dice. And so gambling, strangely enough, in early Indian culture was very much respected because, the gods, I have my two dice, and if I roll them and throw them, can't be an accident what I get. And there are a lot of people I've met who are addicted to gambling who kind of believe that. And for some reason, I've never, in that field, been a kind of gambler. But the worst role, the role that really makes you lose everything, is when they call the two eyes. That means you get each dice rolls a one, and there you are. And those are demonic eyes looking out at you, and you then have to give up whatever the people you're gambling with give up, and that and combinations of the first two, that and the double rule. And this is in the Mahabharata, where the hero Yudhishthira, who was the rightful king, he lost his kingdom gambling. So he was a great king and great uh, leader, except he was addicted to gambling. I think that former President Trump would have really exploited this guy. um, anyway, so he lost his everything, including his wife Kunti, and this was, and she was the anyway. That's a whole long story you'll have to study, but it really has to do with the end of time. The real sad destruction of things, and so all of the good ages eventually degenerate. And what happens is they, in more modern, and modern being in the last 3,000 years, and as the histories and the stories that are associated with Hindus developed, the idea that the Kali Yuga, or the destruction of not only the environment, but the destruction politically, where people would really hate each other, and then the warrior castes would become filled with psychos who would try to take over, and they would fight. And then the gods would become displeased. And so the environment was destroyed, the society was destroyed. And is that enough?
And the individual.
Oh, yeah, the individual would get killed. So, and this was basically the end of the universe, in which all human beings would be removed from the planet. And then the golden age would start again. Finally. And so it's not a very optimistic way of looking at things. But what happened in what was a very popular thing at a certain point in Indian history, and it's becoming popular today again, is that the reason that the Kali Yuga comes is that the caste system breaks down. And so what happens is that people of upper caste, who are the priests, the Brahmins, start to mix with other castes. And when that happens, then people get all confused as to what their duty in life is. And so unqualified people.
So is the theory.
So this is the theory for sure. Anyway, it brings on displeasure, in Mother Nature. So the gods these people can't do proper sacrifices, and it causes the destruction of society. And this view is not supported by many of this retelling and the retelling of the stories. But it was always often pointed out by some as, this is the kind of the fundamentalist, literalist view of what they're talking about. And so many times at the arriving of a disaster, and in some of the Puranas, it would not be just fire, but there would also be floods. And just like the story of Noah's Ark. Manu, who was considered he was like Adam. Manu was considered the first human in a lot of the stories. He would come up against flooding. And so what he would do is, there's this one beautiful story where Manu, as the destructive waters started to rise and humans would drown, and of course fish kind of liked it. Because the humans would start throwing plastic in the ocean and other things that they love to do. But as the water rose, Manu thought, the little fish came to him, and the little fish said, "Oh, hi," and he made friends with the fish. And he said, "Can you save me from those really big fish that are coming?" And so it became like his pet. And he made that connection. And what he did was he was able to, in a sense, build something like a refuge, reminiscent of the Ark, And then he reintegrated with all of these creatures of the ocean and the creatures of the land. And then the New Age began, but most of the other humans had been wiped out. And now it was just Manu with revitalized Mother Nature. And so he was friends with all of these creatures. And many other, like another famous place where the yugas are all mentioned many times, you know, the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita being part of it, that the teaching is, and then the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a later Purana or history, they're saying that the Kali Yuga begins, or it began when Krishna left the earth. And this was, of course, the end of the great battle and stuff. And even Krishna, who was playing the role of a kshatriya, or a king or a warrior, and the kshatriyas are often the problem. He got shot in the heel. He had an Achilles heel, which is from a story that's very similar to the Greek story of Achilles. And the person who shot him in the heel was very apologetic because he saw, I just shot, the supreme being in the heel. And so he went and apologized, and Krishna said, no problem at all, because the heel looked like a deer or something. And at the moment that Krishna left, there was like thunder and things, and the Kali Yuga began. And then most of the interpretations of that implied of what happens is when Krishna, who is the beloved in all beings, including, I've read that it's us too, and is actually, you are simultaneously this supreme beloved being who is in all creatures, little fish and rabbits and dragons and demons and the beloved. And if they actually can, and the Satya Yuga is when you actually see the beloved and you actually love the other person, not because there's some supreme deity that you're seeing separately, but that their actual being is Brahman, or this pure consciousness. And it's just like, you love them. And it's, and that's considered to be seeing or sharing, the immediate experience. And so earth, so when Krishna left the earth, Kali Yuga began. But the whole Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying, oh, I am the earth. I am this which is arising right in front of you. I am the interconnectedness. Not that they come from me, but the direct experience you're having of sensation and smell and taste, that's me. That's the beloved. And then you start to pay attention. And then as soon as that's separated, the teachings of yoga are lost, and the basis of creatures cooperating and communicating and learning from each other is lost. And that's what the Kali Yuga is. Yeah. So it's very sad.
And an interesting aspect to it in that Wendy Donoghue pointed out, and she has an amazing book that we should have brought up to show it to you, so you all go and get it.
Yeah. It's called The Hindus.
The Hindus. It's like
it's
a
about
book
that
about
thick.
Yeah, about it.
And I want you all to read that.
Yeah, it's a fabulous book. But one of the points she made really is that, there are these different interpretations of what the Kali Yuga is, and the sort of more fundamentalist and rigid approach. And we often talk about this in our talks here, how there is this tendency and this need to know, this tendency to need to know, and to then codify things, and to then control things and stop looking at things. And in a sense, this organization of this process of movement through these different yugas is part of this when people say, "Oh, well, this is the Yuga," um, Kali Yoga, that's when people kind of like when people say, "Oh, well, so and so broke their leg, that's karma," or they, had such and such happen to them, and that's their karma. And then you have done with it, and it's an explanation. You don't have to think about it anymore, and you don't have to do anything about it. And what Wendy was pointing out, which is, I think, such a beautiful way of looking at this, is that the yugas allow us to look at the passage of time in both a sort of circular, cyclical manner, as well as a linear manner. Mm-hmm. And so that you have this agility to be able to sort of roll with things and also see with depth and see with hindsight and intelligence. So you're able to, it's, the Kala chakra, the passage of time, then has this element to it that makes it sort of envelop everything. And if it becomes a process that you engage in rather than something that you theorize about.
Right. Again, the idea of karma, that karma is extremely a wonderful thing, not in the sense of getting rewarded or punished, but if you really if you have this sense of love, you're not really interested in being rewarded or punished or praised or ridiculed, but you see it's a creative process, and that creative process is basically the exploration of the mystery with others. Mm-hmm. And so the cool thing about looking that Wendy likes to point out is that there's such an abundance of different stories and different interpretations historically of the meaning of the yugas, and then all of the different myths, all of the different gods and goddesses. And a lot of these are from people of slightly different historical periods and slightly different ethnic backgrounds, and so some of the brilliant creativity of India, and then that part of the Indo-European band across into Asia is the fact that different people, different cultures and different teachers, different kingdoms, peoples were meeting each other. And for a lot of the time, they were actually exchanging. And then they would rewrite, and then they get inspired. So a lot of the great teachers and the great texts are the result of inspiration from different cultures finally communicating and interacting. And I'm just thinking of a classic one is the Mughal dynasty in India, which is of course the very unpopular, because that was it wasn't, parts of it were violent. That was, the Mughals were from the Middle East, they were speaking Persian when they arrived, but they became kings, and the kings used the local Brahmins, who were extremely skilled at all kinds of things in language. And what happened was that the Brahmins amongst themselves started to create explore the schools of modern goddesses, of taking apart and reframing, the caste system, the tantric system, the yoga systems. They were all reframed, and the stories retold and then retold again in different parts of India. And so a lot of brilliant insight came out of it. And so today, we have this interconnected planet where we can go on to Zoom, okay? And, from all different cultures and all different, because each of us is unique in some way, and we can actually learn and study. And we start to see that the subject that we're studying is everything, whether it's geology or, physics or what are these other culinary arts in different cultures, and it's just infinite. It's just like, wow, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And in this way, we find the beloved in the other. And this is the actual joy of, when someone says Kali Yuga, it's kind of so we're all knowers, and we, in that realization of time, and then the sorrow of, or the mystery of death, we rediscover each other. And so there are a lot of modern swamis and very, orthodox Hindu teachers that say, "Oh, the Kali Yuga, it just ended," okay, rather than it just began. And
it's said to last
about 435,000 years.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the real depressing fundamentalist thing, you're just getting started. And at the rate we're going, looking at the news every day now, we're not doing very well.
But if you look at it as this ongoing process, even if it is true that we're at the very beginning of these 4,000 some plus years.
400.
Yeah.
35,000.
Yeah, 400. If you can look at it as this process, that really truly, like so often we say, on these talks, everything really is made up of wave patterns, and of these patterns of one thing impacting another, and one's ability to be with that process of interpenetration and things impacting one another, and then to use intelligence, mental intelligence, physical intelligence, heartfelt intelligence, to take action that is of the best service to the whole as you can. And as you were talking, Richard, it was reminding me of so often, when we're teaching bits of the Yoga Sutra, one of the things that I find wonderful about it is the fact that, it lays out all these things that are, things that you can follow and do, and actions that you can take, and practices that you can have. And then it says, you do this, and then you do this. And so it gives you this option really to not become someone who is looking for a formula, whether it be called something like, oh, well, I'm going to just assign all of this to karma, or assign all of this to the, Kali Yuga or whatever. But that it also, as so many of the other texts, when you look a little more deeply at them, they're not saying this is the, rule of law, and you have to memorize it and then follow these particular tenets. They're saying, that you yourself, as Richard was saying, are this, embodiment of what Krishna represents, which is interconnectedness. And as soon as you unplug yourself, as soon as Krishna left the earth, that's
which
when
in your body would be the earth in your pelvic floor.
Yeah, the pelvic floor, or the mental, the mental, constructs that you build as,
and that which we share, which is the environment. With other creatures.
So.
Wow. Yeah, and so a lot of and so the beauty of what's going on today is in the face of some of the most tragic and horrible things. And what the tragedy, besides the destruction of the environment, is the fighting, the wars, the deliberate cruelty, because there are certain, kshatriyas or psychopathic emperors, autocrats who really play on hatred, because just looking at the other. So they play on racism, on hatred, on sexism,
and the root of
and
so
that's
much
their
of
way of gaining power.
Yeah.
Is here.
They stoke the fires of fear to whatever degree they can, so that those who tend to go into aggression will go into aggression. Those who tend to retreat and not be able to do things become passive. Yeah, so that these fires of fear are stoked in times like these, and when you think in dogged terms, when you think in formulaic terms, like we've been talking about, with calling something a name and then not looking again, you become prey to to anyone who is adept and at bringing fear into the situation. Because we even though all of us, and it's not a bad thing to want to know, like why are all these things happening? It's not a bad thing, but as soon as you have decided why, then there is part of our intuitive intelligence in all of us, like even in some of the people who are the most racist, angry, horrible people doing very bad deeds these days. There is this seed of fear based in the knowledge that they don't really know for sure. Because none of us, when you really, in the moments of truth with yourself, maybe when you're just brushing your teeth in the morning and happen to catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror and you go, oh my God, that those moments, you don't know. And
it's hard to admit that.
It's hard to admit that.
And so that's usually projected in the psychological sense. It's projected onto others. And so the ones who don't know are those lower, stupid people over there that we should enslave and exploit. And but they know, but still your body, your own mind knows that you don't know, and it's embodied in your own nervous system. So to keep you there, so it gets deeper and more problematic.
And so one of the techniques that is spoken of in many of the Buddhist teachings is that when you have that really what you do, because those things like anger or greed or fear itself or insecurity or emotional states that are overwhelming, like sadness, when they become overwhelming, they then become part of the process that allows you not to be able to be authentic, to show up, and to use whatever intelligence you happen to be able to have. And so many teachings are pointed at, and this is true with the Yoga Sutra, I think, as well, is that you go into the first thing you really can do is to be truthful with yourself, with svadvaya, with the ability to really be honest and look clearly at yourself. And that doesn't mean staring at yourself in the mirror and taking selfies and saying, yeah, those are good. That's self-study as well. Some people do.
Yeah.
But what it does mean is that you are really able to be still within yourself and honest within yourself, to see who you are, and so that you can recognize, oh yeah, I have a tendency to be, to things go wrong and I become angry, or things go wrong, I become critical, things go not according to my plan, and I become terrified, etc. And then to just not try to fix the whole thing, but to look at the one that seems to be the most prominent block for you at being authentic. Because if there is this feeling when you really know that you're being yourself, that I think we all have had experiences with, and hopefully as we progress through life, we find ways to be that connected to the essence of truth within us, more and more and more, rather than less and less and less. And that is, in my, perspective, that is one of the ways into the suffering that occurs in could be called the Kali Yuga. But without the authenticity there, you can't begin to even address it. So then you have to label it. So really, truly looking at with almost a brutal honesty to yourself, like, what is it that when I do my sitting practice, what persistent thoughts come up, and what persistent patterns of thinking come up, and then just start there and say, not like, well, I'm going to change those, but just then look at them a little more deeply.
Yeah. And that's the old, experience. You get angry at your anger, and but at a certain point, you see that, and that makes you just pause. You hit the pause button, and it's not like. So one of the things in Kali Yuga is anger arising. And we won't show the picture of Kali Yuga. But it's so a lot of the Kali Yuga starts with some kind of angry, either a good monster or a bad monster coming and rising up out of the ocean or coming out of the sky and destroying things. But a lot of them are just expressions, and this one called Haigriva, who is if you can show it, I don't know.
Trying to show it.
Because this is,
okay.
Anyway, if we succeed in showing you, the art will help you understand.
Okay. See that. You can't see
I don't know
that.
if that shows.
Can you see that? This is, let me move it to the center. I can't move it. Oops. I'm not very adept at this. Here is Haigriva. And yeah.
I don't know.
Can you see this? Give me a thumbs up if you can. And you also see that I'm recording on the side.
Okay. Yeah. So this is inside of all of us, when we are truly angry. But Haigriva, he has a little horse coming out of the top of his head, which has to do with the beginning of the Kali Yuga. But he's just pure anger. But he's smart, and there's no object to the anger. So this is a Tibetan statue that we have right inside of our entrance to our house here in Boulder. You walk in the door, and this is what you see. And this discourages certain people when they come over. And so that feeling, and so this is no longer are you angry at your anger, but all of a sudden you just see, that anger it's not me, it's emptiness. And so the emotion, which is so destructive, actually allows you then to, it purifies and allows the movement of your awareness in the central channel or the middle path. because it's no longer projected onto others. And so it really is the cessation of anger by no longer trying to get rid of it. It's like with the chitta vrittis.
And it is an acceptance of it, sort of absorbing it into
It's like, wow.
and it then branches out from there into acceptance of other, acceptance of the way things are, that people right now are in Jackson, Mississippi, suffering because of the floods there, or people in Pakistan are suffering because of the floods there. And it's not just a complacent kind of acceptance. It's an acceptance with a real burning desire to
be helpful,
to take action. And also an acceptance that allows for forgiveness. So that this idea of finding your authentic self, meaning you're not small self, but the big self, like who you are when you feel like yourself, finding this capacity to accept yourself with all the flaws that you notice that you have that could spin you out into, if you're thinking of the yugas as this sort of internalized cyclical part of your own time frame, it could spin you out into your own, craziness or mental state that or emotional state that is not stable. But if you see it and hold it and then accept it, it becomes an act of generosity, which is really one of the key elements that can start to heal some of this trouble. And that, again, in so many of the books, like with the Gita that we always refer back to, with Krishna and Arjuna, when Krishna is really forgiving, or when you look at Jesus Christ, like he loved the sinners sometimes more than those who were not the sinners. It's this capacity for seeing beyond the superficial. It takes training to do that. Richard and I have been, practice. We've been doing this thing recently where we got hooked on puzzles, putting together 1,000-piece puzzles, which has eaten up some of the time that we might be doing something more productive. But for us, it's very therapeutic. And we've been doing puzzles of some Tibetan tankas, which are great. So that's been fun. We just finished one this afternoon. And the fascinating thing is to watch how we are so different in the way we do them. And that the complement of, I sort of don't look at the picture. I look at the shape and the colors and the feel of the pieces. And Richard's got the box out with the picture
and the magnifying glass. Oh, that's a person.
Yeah. But we'd both be stuck without these different, if I didn't accept his approach and he didn't accept mine, and I didn't forgive myself for not being able to even see with the magnifying glass, we'd be up the creek. But I give that as an example because it is this way, as we are in the world with others, when we can really acknowledge these differences and accept them and then build on them. That's what gets us out of troubled times. It is not to say, well, what's wrong with you because you're not seeing things my way, which is what does lead to some of the disastrous stuff that we have going on in the world at the moment.
Yeah.
And then, so again, that feeds back into this idea when we run into troubles or difficulties or calamities, that it is really important to be able to pause, take a step back, and see what it is that we're doing that is helpful and helpful to the whole.
Yeah.
But also see what we are doing that is not helpful, that is making it worse for others. And then to have the kindness and generosity to stop doing those things. And often we do those things out of fear, the actions of greed or anger or whatever.
Yeah, and doing it that way, you don't listen to feedback. And then you have Kali Yuga.
Yeah.
So we should.
Yeah. So we wanted to, we wanted to do a very brief, maybe 5 minutes, even though we're saying, oh, we want to wrap it up by saying that who knows, what the Kali Yuga really is in terms of our daily lives. And, since none of us will live as long as any of the yugas in the scriptures are sometimes said to be, we can pretend or absorb them into our own daily cyclical patterns of time, but also to acknowledge that we are in, as we have said, we are in these times that are extraordinarily troubling and extraordinarily difficult, with the floods, with let's see what else has gone on. Oh, these horrible killings that have started to happen outside of the United States, even now this week, being one in Canada. There have been a few mass killings in Europe recently because, which I, of course, think, well, they're modeling themselves on this idea of the play that's given to it in the media by what happens in this country. And we can really look at what are the little things we're doing, even from branding ourselves as this or that or the other, or buying into the superficiality, not the authenticity, but the superficiality that this notion of branding, that this notion of a picture of ourselves on social media keeps us stuck in. We can say, okay, maybe I have to do that for reasons of marketing and financial gain. But when I take these pauses, I can step back and find that authentic self again and operate from there. And if I am out in the world doing things that are superficial, I can pause and say, is this really necessary? And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But we wanted to just take a moment, like it's now by this clock, it's 6:51. And I wanted to get just maybe 3 or 4 minutes of a sitting practice together. The power of sitting and dropping in and bringing to mind who we are, why we're here, and what is the state of the world. So let's just do that for a moment and arrange yourself if you need to a little differently so that you can have the spine elongating, and even lying down is fine, or sitting up nice and tall, but don't hold the posture with muscles. Let the posture be held by the breath. And bring your awareness into the sensation of support from beneath you, the support from the surface upon which you are resting, and the support of gravity, so that you are steady and stable. And soften the tongue and the jaw. And release any tension that you feel in the palate. Letting the breath just be. The heart floats and sitting bones drop. And then bring to mind one person or a group of people or a situation, a part of nature, and it could even be yourself, that you're aware of that is experiencing suffering at this moment. Perhaps some image of Ukraine, an idea about families who lost loved ones from fires or floods, violence. Or someone who is deeply, deeply angry and suffering and really suffering. And bring an image of this one to mind. And as you imagine this one, at the same time, feel the sense of spaciousness, if you can, that is in your heart when you drop into the experience of really being yourself, really being tuned in to the truth of being connected, being generous, being truthful, listening, seeing the other. Come into those feelings within yourself. And if you can, as you feel those feelings, allow that image of the other one to be beside you, outside you, and breathe that sense of spaciousness, tenderness from within out toward the other. Just a little softness. Offering kindness into the world with no need to get anything back. Deep breath in, the heart is bright. And as you breathe out, the heart stays open and bright, and let the tenderness penetrate outward. It'll find what it needs to find to soften and to be of service. And keep the heart bright. And then let the image, if it's still there, of whomever it was or whatever it was you imagined, let that fade into the background, but feel that sense of connection to Earth. The fact that we're sitting here connecting to Earth, and there are people on the other side of the Earth on this very call who are connecting to same thing. We're all in this. And then if the eyes are closed, let the eyes open. And Richard and I encourage you, every day to take a minute or 2 minutes to just pause in the frenzy and to really feel this sense of spaciousness and tenderness in the heart that is the root of who you are. It's the essence of being human. And then as you feel that, allow that also to be given away with no thought of what are you going to get back from it. Mm-hmm. And it's just a little thing, but it's something that can be very transformative. So, do you want to do that too? Do a question.
I'll do a chant. And this is to the three-eyed one. So one eye would make you a monist, unable to appreciate anything. Just two eyes don't seem to be working very well, because then you're a dualist. So three. And so this is to the three-eyed one, Trayambakam Yajamahe, who is Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam, who is an expert, who is, Sugandhim means really smelling like a wonderful flower. And so who knows how to take with the fragrance of a wonderful blooming flower, is skilled at growing or cultivating beings, including us. And then so at the right moment, just like a farmer can pluck the being from the vine, which many people interpret as the moment of death. But if you really study, it's the moment of birth, because you're plucked from the vine when the umbilical cord is finally severed from the mother. And so this is, and give us this nectar of immortality. And so this is from the Vedas. Om Trambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvamukam Iva Bandhanam Mrityo Mukshiyamamritata Trambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvamukam Iva Bandhanam Mrityo Mukshiyamamritata. Om. So, birth and death. So we all go through all the 4 yugas many times a day. Okay, some of us get stuck in the Kali Yuga.
Yeah, hopefully you can get out of
but
it.
If you watch your thoughts, you'll see the different phases. And it's like, oh, there was a whole eon just passed right there.
And we had one more thing that we wanted to share, which I'm not going to screen share it with you because I can't, but there is a story we read about today on the news, because in these dire times, there's always this sense of connection and humor. And those are the things, that really get us through and that really make a difference. So we encourage you to look on YouTube and find and just put in there Ukrainian chimpanzee bicycle. And what happened was there was this chimpanzee in a zoo in Ukraine, and the area of the zoo has been bombed and bombed and bombed, which is just this horrible state to be living in. And the chimpanzee escaped, probably trying to get away from the noise and all of this. And the film of it is that it's just walking around, heading around the neighborhood, not doing anything. And then suddenly one of the zookeepers appears and kneels down.
The one who
takes care of this chimpanzee. And the chimp comes running across to the zookeeper with the arms out, and the zookeeper's arms are out, and he throws himself into her arms. And she, of course, falls onto this cement thing, and they roll around together. And then he runs off again because he doesn't feel too good about things. And then she sits down with him. She catches up with him and she sits down with him. And you see her sitting there trying to convince him to come back to the zoo. And he doesn't want to. And then it starts raining. And so she takes off her own coat, and he comes running over towards her. And there's this part where he's putting on her jacket to stay out of the rain. And then they hug. And then they put him on a bicycle and take him back to the zoo. And it's just this thing of the tenderness that we're talking about, that it doesn't take big things. Here they are in a war zone, but they are taking care of not only all of the neighbors and the people, but they're new friends. So check it out.